Welcome to Blue Talks.
So last Friday night, I fell asleep on my couch. And I know for people who know me, this is really hard to believe because I am such a party animal. I mean, I'm at the club every single night. But it was really late, like 7, 8 o'clock. So, it happens. And what I had been doing was waiting for my husband to get home. Now, we've been in a long-distance marriage for about the last 6 months or so, which means that on Friday night, one or the other of us is probably driving. One thing to know about my husband is that we just celebrated our 11th anniversary, and I am happy to report that we have both survived. He may not have that new husband smell anymore, but he really is wrong in all the right ways, and my partner in crime. The other thing to know about him is that he's in medicine. So that means his job can be pretty dark, up to and including death. And I knew when he was coming home that night that he had some stuff he needed to talk about. So he comes bouncing in the house like a Labrador retriever and flaps on the couch, and I wake up and understand that up until this point, I wasn't sleeping peacefully like a sweet Disney princess. I was ugly sleeping. Do we all know what ugly sleeping is? I had drool coming out of my face. My mascara was smeared back to my ear. I had pillow creases all over, and my cats would not come into the room because of some of the noise I was making. Yeah, I was ugly sleeping. So when he showed up and I came out of that and he started talking, I let him have it. And I don't mean I snapped. I mean I came down like 2 tons of bricks. Now, in my defense, I believe that when you're woke out of a deep sleep like that you are not responsible for anything that happens in the first 2 seconds. And to his credit, he agreed, because he looked at me and he blinked and he said, "I'm going to go make a ham sandwich and then we're going to start this over." And he left. He had already forgotten what had happened, but I hadn't. I'm supposed to be the empathy lady. My Instagram handle is the empathy queen. I research empathy for a living, to the extent that I get to talk at places like Oxford, for which I am so grateful. But how am I supposed to be the ambassador of empathy if I can't even show it to my husband when he gets home? I set myself up for an expectation that I couldn't meet. When I compared myself to that expectation and fell short, I judged myself. And when that happened, I felt ashamed, I felt like a fraud, and I felt like an imposter. And those feelings stuck with me for the next week. Empathy is one of those fluffy emotions that we all think we understand until we have to put a definition to it. And it is difficult. There's 43 different kinds. So I would like to look at one today that we don't talk about much, and that's self-empathy. And I want to look at it by comparing how we give empathy to other people versus how we give empathy to ourselves. When you feel empathy for another person, by definition, you feel discomfort. That's what happens. When that happens, we have 3 choices. We can either lean into that feeling, We can not feel that feeling and numb, or we can back away and deflect. When you lean in, that means you allow yourself to be in that place of discomfort, which is a lot harder to do than it sounds. It's what Brené Brown calls being in the suck. And it really is. Because it just feels uncomfortable. But you're not doing anything. You're not taking responsibility. You're not judging. You're not fixing it. You might not even be saying anything. You are just in the feeling. Now, the interesting part about this is that when we feel that discomfort, oftentimes we are spurred to take action. And that action is called compassion. Empathy is what you feel. Compassion is what you do. Numbing is practically a national pastime. And it doesn't have to just be the food and drug and alcohol and sex. It can be as simple as binge watching Netflix, or fantasy football, or crushing candies, or throwing yourself into your job, or throwing yourself into your kids. Numbing in and of itself is not bad. We have to do it for our sanity. It becomes bad when we do it too much, too often, so that we don't feel what's really underneath. Deflection is interesting because it's what happens when the person who should be giving the empathy instead says or does something to make themselves feel better. And this is how we get comments that just seem a little off, like, oh, well, at least she didn't suffer long. Or, well, at least you have your health. Or my all-time favorite, everything happens for a reason. Now, the truth of these statements aside, because maybe they're true and maybe they're not, the point is that they're not being said for the person who needs the empathy. They're being said to alleviate the discomfort of the person who should be giving the empathy. And that's the difference. When you feel empathy for yourself, it's a little bit different. You can't deflect because those emotions are inside of you, so you can't run away from them. That means your options are either to lean in or to numb. When we lean in, we have to dig through all of the different layers, just like in the initial story. There's usually some kind of an expectation that we can't meet. And it could be put there by society. It could be put there by our parents. It could be put there by the media, that we can't keep up with what's going on in movies and TV. Or it could be social media, because we all know that everything that's on Facebook is absolutely true. We have an expectation we can't meet. We compare ourselves against that expectation. And no matter what we do when we can't meet it, we judge ourselves. And after the judgment is when we get the hard feelings, the shame, feeling like an imposter, feeling like you don't fit in, feeling like a fraud. As the French poet Honoré de Balzac said, the more I judge, the less I love. And that's especially true for yourself. Numbing is especially insidious when we do it to ourselves, because you can do it until you lose who you are. When I was very young, I went through a divorce. And I was completely gutted, shattered. I didn't understand why something that seemed to come so naturally to everybody else couldn't come naturally to me. And I started numbing. And my drug of choice was food and alcohol. The problem was, for me, it gave a very physical manifestation of what was going on. So I felt ashamed. So I ate and drank. And I put on weight, which meant then there was another societal expectation I couldn't meet. So I felt ashamed. So I ate and drank. And round it went until I ended up like that. And you can see on her face that she is smiling, but her eyes are not happy. it was never about the weight on my body. It was always about the weight on my heart. When we numb ourselves in this way, we gradually lose ourselves over time, which is where I suggest we can begin by keeping a cool head and a warm heart. Sometimes when your heart burns just so hot, you can't get a hold of the feelings. But there's this thing called cognitive empathy, which means I logically understand what's going on. I just don't necessarily feel it. Now, because it's for you, you're going to feel it. But if you can temper that hot heart with just a little bit of cold logic, you can start to get a hold of what you're feeling. My research is actually leading me to believe that we need 3 kinds of empathy to be able to understand our emotions and the emotions of others. And that is emotional empathy, the heart, cognitive empathy, the head, and self-empathy, the human. Because how can you possibly understand empathy for anybody else if you can't understand it for yourself? One way to go about this is by using the 5 whys, which just means you keep asking why till you get to a root cause. And it works like this. I was completely broken at my divorce, shattered. Well, why? Because there's this thing that seemed to be so easy and was just supposed to be part of life, and I couldn't make it happen. Well, why do you feel this is your problem? Because everybody around me can do it. My friends, my family, my grandparents. There must be something broken in me. Well, but that was their choice. Why does this mean you're broken? Because it was instilled in me as a child that you keep the marriage together no matter how miserable everybody is. Well, why is that your choice? It's not. It's me reaching for an expectation that I can't meet. Maya Angelou said, "I believe we all have empathy. I just don't believe we all have the courage to use it." And I think that's especially true when holding empathy for yourself, because you know what feelings lie underneath all that dirt. But if you can start to excavate, to dig layer by layer through the dirt to get to the bottom of the emotions, then you can start to feel the feelings and give yourself self-empathy. And this is possible if you keep a cool head and a warm heart. So I challenge everyone in this room today, the next time you catch yourself numbing, to take a moment and do the excavation, digging layer by layer. Besides, if empathy leads to compassion, then self-empathy leads to self-compassion. And as we all know, the most beautiful flowers can grow from the dirt.